Hi everyone, welcome to our Building with Resilience series. We are here today with a very exciting conversation that is focused on navigating change. The conversation today is between three individuals who are experts in the area of change management with many years of experience and who will share with us their personal stories, thoughts, and their advice on this topic. The discussion is based on one of the four key pillars within the Resilient Agility model, which is a model that has been developed by Saville Assessment. The pillar of focus, namely the pillar called Dealing with Change, forms a key element of how we can build and strengthen our resilient agility through the ability to embrace change and uncertainty. Let me now hand over to Julie Whitten to start the conversation on navigating change.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today on our podcast around navigating change. My name is Julie Whitten, and I lead change management for Sodexo North America. I'm here with Burak Koyuncu from the Adecco Group and Eric Cornu from Nestle, and we are going to be having a conversation around navigating change. And first thing I'm going to do is ask Burak and Eric to both introduce themselves. Burak, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Julie. Great to be here. Great to have this conversation on change. As you mentioned, I'm part of the Adecco Group. We are a talent solutions company that has three specific business units. One is Adecco, one is Akkodis, and the third one is LHH. I work as part of LHH, leading the leadership development business for UK and international markets within LHH. LHH is a human capital company that looks at professional recruitment, career transition, mobility, and also leadership development services. So joining from London today, and great to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. And Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Burak. So Eric Cornu, I'm part of a Nestle Group. I'm in charge of global organization design and change management, which is essentially the organization effectiveness part of it and organization transformation. It's an area that I have specialized actually over the past years, and I'm really enjoying. So I'm just happy to be here with you today and talk a little bit about change in organization, how we manage that, both the people aspect of change, the organizational aspect. Looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Eric. Let's dive right in. This notion of change management is such a hot topic lately. I was wondering if you can both personally share how you define change management, and in your opinion, how has it changed in recent times? So Eric, can we please begin with you?
That's a tough question to start with, because my experience is that everybody has its own definition of change management, and actually it's one of the challenge now. My own definition, it doesn't need to be right or wrong, is essentially two words. One is willing, and the second one is able. So essentially, the goal of change management is to make sure that employees and our stakeholders are both willing and able to function in the new reality. Now, able is easy to understand, and it's actually the easiest part. The challenge is around willing. Okay, and how do we make, and I think that's going to be a lot of what we're going to talk about. So now, in my experience, actually, one of the challenges that we have when we talk about change management is that for a lot of business leaders, when they talk change management, they have a much broader view. And it includes a lot of things that people like us, I mean, the HR professional and consultant, would probably put more on project management. And that's where actually a lot of the misexpectations can come. So I think it's important that actually we also have the conversation with leaders on here. What do they see as change management and what do they expect?
Very good. Thank you, Eric. And Brett, what would you like to add to that thought?
Yeah, that was a great start. Thanks, Eric. I love that willingness and ability to change. For me, in addition to that, I think I would add an emotional shift, especially maybe because I work in this space have been working for a long while, and what I see when change works or when change doesn't work, the difference is in people's intentions to make something work, which is related to the will element, and really going through that emotional change to be ready for the new ways of doing things. And change management, hence, is about managing people's emotion through that journey.
I couldn't agree more, Burak. I had an instructor once that said, change management would be easy if it wasn't for the people, right? But I can certainly appreciate both your comments on that. And I can share in SEDEX. So, a lot of times change management, the culture isn't very mature yet. There's certainly an appetite, but it means communications or training to most people. And it's so much more than that. So that's why I'm looking forward to our conversation, diving a little bit deeper today. And I wanted to take it one step further and talk about the difference between change management and change leadership. So Eric, would you like to comment on that one?
But that's another challenging one, because again, I can have my own view, and it depends if we're talking about change leadership. And we're looking at the role of leaders in change, which is a critical role. Okay, and again, a change that is not supported by leadership is a change that will fail, and that's something that I very often experience. And look, the role of leadership, and by that I understand senior management, and I know that there is another angle, obviously, in change leadership that I'll come to in a minute. So for me, one of the absolutely critical elements is that senior leaders in an organization that is, affected by significant change, have to be active and visible. And that's really the two things that I very often, it's a conversation that I have with them. Say, look, just by being active and visible, you're going to avoid yourself a lot of issues and a lot of questions after. And if you just show up, and it's really, they just need to be there to send some very simple message, but their role is absolutely critical. If anybody in the organization believes that senior leaders are not behind it, they're going to be hiding that. Now, the second part, and I'll be short on that, is obviously, hey, what is leadership? And is leadership just about your position in the organization? Of course not. But I call that second part, actually, I called it more, I like the concept of change ambassadors. Okay, and because it's another element that we need in every organization, you need to find people who are passionate about it. You need to have people who are going actually to have a voice which is much closer to everybody affected. So, a good change management practice involves actually a lot of people who are going to help you convey the message the way it is. Sorry, it's a little bit of a long answer, but as you can see, I'm passionate about the topic, and I could be talking for too long.
I think your answer was spot on, and you hit so many great points, but I want to turn it over to Burak to add a few more thoughts.
Sure, I think we can all keep going about these topics. Great questions. And I want to make a distinction before I answer the question. And this is also based on our LHH research that we did sometime before the pandemic. Change is slightly different than transformation. And most organizations are confused about it. And what we know change is about in general is really about addressing the issues that need to be addressed. It's about fixing the problems. It's about changing something to address your needs today and the solve for the problems of yesterday. But transformation is about really shaping the future. It's a different way of looking at it, right? And it's a fundamentally bigger type of change. It's not reversible. Changes can be reversible. Transformation, once you transformed, you transformed. And it requires different ways of leading and managing. So when you're managing change, you can have a plan and implement it. And you change something, you know how the steps are. There you need some management, meaning you need to follow step by step what needs to be done, right? If you are changing, I don't know, your mobile phone's case, you know how to do it. There are simple instructions to do it, right? If you're buying a new car or something, using their instructions, you can follow them and make it work. So change management requires that. Change leadership, and I hear that, I hear more of the transformational elements in it. How to lead change, it really requires the thinking about the future and inspiration for going there. how do you inspire people? How do you help people navigate through the uncertainty that the future brings? And those are really fully about leadership. I'll stop here.
I mean, if I may jump, Burak, completely agree with you and your point on the different type of changes, and actually they require very different approach. But again, we would need much more time than what we have here.
Maybe we'll need to do a part two. This is wonderful. I was thinking about, as you were both speaking, this notion of change leadership, and sometimes getting people kind of aligned from a leadership level is the first step, right? And sometimes we have to change manage ourselves. We might be catching and receiving something that we might personally not agree with, but we are still charged with bringing people along on the journey with us. So this next question is kind of on the personal side, but just wanting you to share an example of how you've effectively managed a change within your organizations. So Burak, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm thinking of an example, but when you say personal example, I was just thinking of my own changes combined with organizational changes. And the first thing that came to my mind is when I actually joined my organization as a business leader, the team that I inherited had been so change fatigued. They had 3 different leaders within the past year. So of course you can imagine how, let's say, not engaged they were when I joined. I could see that in their eyes, and they were almost like tired of everything, and they were wondering, what am I gonna do? Like the previous 2 people did not even survive a year, and not because it was organizational. One was, I think, personal change, and then something else happened. But they were really not sure if they wanted to engage with me. And I remembered in my first day, I brought the team together. I was just reading their, like, let's say, not readiness, let's say that way. They were not ready to, they were not looking forward to this new change. And I felt also bad because I was so excited, right? So I asked them some difficult questions. I wanted to kind of get under their, like, not well engaged emotional state. And they started to open up. And I said, what would you like to ask me? And then one of them said, we have seen so many people coming and going recently. How do we know you are the right person? Why shall we be excited about it? And I remember that, like, still as if it was yesterday. This was 5 years ago. I said, you know what? I don't even know if I am the right person or not myself. I have doubts as well, and I have fears. I came from a comfortable job to something different. I don't know if I will make it work, but I can tell you that I'll put all my energy and love into it, and I will work really hard, and I will bring all my experience. And here are the different experiences I have. So that somehow broke the temperature in the room a little bit. Everybody was like, wow, nobody was expecting that. Everybody was expecting me to just say, yeah, I can do this. This is how I did it before, that type of stuff. And I think that helped me from the beginning in managing that change. I was very honest. I shared my emotions. I wanted them to share their emotions. That's also related to my earlier answer about emotional shift, I guess. And then the second thing that was really important was sticking to the principles you have and you share with people. I think this is a very hard one for most leaders in businesses, because a lot of the times people lose their faith in the ability of the organization to change because leaders don't seem to be very consistent with their ways of doing things. They change something and in 3 months they change it again. And then people start not believing what they say. So I had a real example, like yesterday, talking to one of my clients. They are going through a tremendous amount of change. And they said 3 months ago, the leaders said that we are just focused on growing our business. And while there are, financial results aren't great, it's fine. We will just focus on the future and try to create that. We won't make any cost cuts or anything. And 3 months after, they are cutting costs and restructuring, right? Of course, that really annoys people. And I think it's very important to show people where you stand in certain things, like, are you longer term focused or shorter term focused, or where you stand in between that? Are you more people focused or numbers focused? You share with people where you are and stick to those principles, no matter how difficult the times are. And when you do that, people then are with you through the change. So that, I think, made it a success for me. That first year I joined the business, the growth was extraordinary, and then for 4 years it followed through, and we had about 134% growth in the last 4 years. So I can say that worked somehow, I guess.
It did. It did. Thank you very much. Eric, how about you?
Look, there's really a lot of experience that I could talk about, and thinking about our audience, some things I can think of. One change, which actually was a big one, was also a transformation change, but a transformation of my own organization, where essentially, which it was a shared service center with several hundred people, and it was a really new, actually, organization. And like many of us have experienced those type of transformation, that was 15 years ago, actually a lot of tension, really a lot of dysfunctional things. And we all know essentially everybody was fighting with everybody, whether it was internally or with the external stakeholders. So hugely conflictive, with a lot of pressure also from the business, and a little bit similar as what you said, Burak. I mean, and I've used that in a lot of things. I think that the first thing that any one of us have to do when we come into, I mean, an organization or a place, is really try to understand, hey, where are they, and what has been happening there, and just feeling a little bit the situation. And I have to say that my first analysis that, okay, those people clearly didn't feel empowered. They felt they were just here to act, and somebody else had to make the decision. And there was a lot of things that didn't work, but it all had to be escalated. So that there was really, I mean, too many fight. And the first thing I did, and actually I did it wrong. So I'll share a failure. My first failure was actually that and it was more than just a shared service center. I mean, I built a vision. I'm a long-term thinker, so I needed to have that, and I shared it with my boss at the time. Said, look, really great, I love it, Eric, but I'm gonna ask you to start again. So the first rule, I mean, for a vision, if you actually want it to be embraced, is build it with the team. And I was young and impatient still at that time, and I thought about it and said, I was really upset, because I was really, I mean, I was in love with my own words, but he told me, I mean, my strong advice here is that you should, and he was right. So actually, yes, restarted, and we did something very interesting, and actually we came ourselves, and actually the way we managed to change, and we wanted to reorganize the whole group, because the way it was structured, the way the process were built, we're creating a lot of things, and clearly there was a lack of ownership. And it's really, for me, in those type of situations, just listen to the people, listen to everybody. There's not a strong, and actually very often the secret to understanding is listen at those voices that just don't dare speaking up. And just go to them and have them express themselves. And if we have, I mean, any young people in the audience, I mean, one of the advice that I would give any younger coming to an organization, look, ask for forgiveness eventually to the organization, but they're speaking up. They're being candid and honest, while being respectful. But actually, we really have to welcome, I mean, those. I know you're passionate, Julie, about I mean, diversity and inclusion. I mean, for me, it's really all about inclusion, hearing different voices, different perspective, and just enrich every one of us. The solutions to all of our problems are, in most of the case, they're within the teams. So we just have to learn to find them.
I could not agree more. Thank you both for sharing the stories. There were so many key things that I want to pull out from your stories. One was about vulnerability, right? And having the courage to be vulnerable and share how you're feeling if you're feeling uneasy. The other one was about transparency, being honest and open with what you know, sharing what you don't know. Another one about building trust, doing what you say you're going to do, because you can't do this alone. And then the empowerment of co-creating change together and really listening to your stakeholders. I made an acronym for some of the classes that I teach: LOVE, LUV, listen, understand, and validate. And a lot of times we hear from those resistors, and those are sometimes the active resistors and the most passionate. Those are the people we want to hear from. Those are the people that make us better, right?
Absolutely.
And the ones that we don't hear from, the passive ones, those we need to kind of uncover through this process. So I love that you're leading with the thought of how do we co-create this change together with the people? How do we help them help us shape the vision that we need to move forward? So thank you for that. This next question kind of dives a little bit more into some of that resistance that we feel when we're trying to implement a change, and how do we work as organizations to help people in our teams become more resilient around the changes that they're asking to implement and having a greater sense of well-being. So Brat, let's start with you on this one.
A difficult question, because I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of the times organizations expect people to be resilient when the change is difficult, and they somehow miss the point in understanding what the resistance is for. And sometimes people really resist for a good reason, and that's probably something about the root cause for the change, or how it's communicated, or how it's designed to start with. So what is needed essentially is not an increase in people's resilience for the change, but it's an increase in how to lead change. But that's a separate story. Coming to the resilience bit, how they can increase, I think the opportunities in what Eric shared before about the co-creation, when the organization creates space for people to input, share their thinking, share their way of leading this change. When the space is there, an invitation is there, people, even if they don't like the change, because they are part of it, they will feel more empowered, and they won't need to have resilience related issues because they'll be fine with it in the end.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, look, completely agree with what Burak just shared, and yes, we've mentioned co-creation, and it's true that, I mean, it's a really tough question, and I'm not sure that I have the right answer. I mean, part of it is co-creation. I think, in my experience, also one important, I mean, feeling that we want those impacted by the change to perceive is that they have to feel supported. They have to feel understood. So yeah, being involved, but also essentially that hey, and that's where the co-creation for me is a wonderful answer, because actually it's the way, hey, we're doing. I mean, this is not a change that is being done to you, but we're going to do that together. There's a reason. There is a why. There is, I mean, a broad what, but there are reasons for it. Now let's do this together, and then you activate that listening. And if people feel listen, I mean, then they feel essentially, okay, this is not somebody who's trying to push me, but actually I understand the reason, and we're working together. So, yeah, it's very difficult to answer more than that. But I mean, I believe also the other important thing, and there's no, again, one solution, is openness and transparency in all your communication, and be as open as you can. While being also open where you can't be transparent, and just say why. I mean, if you say why, everybody's going to understand it.
Absolutely. Great points. And I want to go back to that why too, because I've seen, over the course of my career, a lot of times we forget that why. And that's probably the most critical thing that we need to bring people along. They just want to understand why this is happening, what's in it for them. And Burak, you talked about the time and space, and a lot of times we don't give ourselves or allow ourselves the time and space to get that feedback, right? So we can kind of refine and make things better and bring people along. So certainly opportunities for us to kind of, I don't want to say slow things down, but just plan for that time and space, like you said, and honestly plan for that resistance, anticipate that we will have it and have a plan to mitigate it. So thank you very much. This next one is an interesting question about kind of when do we know we're successful in leading a change and how do we measure that success? So Eric, let's start with you for this one.
I think that's the easiest of all questions. I'm going to be, I'm a little bit provocative, so from time to time I like to do that. Say, look, if you don't have the answer to that question, press the pause button. Okay, because I mean, as you were saying, look, if you're not able, frankly, to explain the what and the why in very simple terms, then you have not think through, and the measurement. Once you understand the what and the why should be very clear. So if you're not able to have a measurement, then you have not corrected very thing. Now, again, as I think Burak was also referring before, I think you alluded that there's different type of changes. So changing the system is very easy, and there's a broad concept of adoption, and actually it's applicable not only in technology, also with process broadly. So I believe adoption is one of those classical terms. It's going to say, look, actually people do it. Now, do they use it well and efficiently is another question, but that is one of the first measure. But at the end of the day, it's about, hey, why did you do it? What were you trying to achieve? And I mean, those are the metrics. And are you achieving them? Yes or no? It's as simple as that.
Very good. Thank you so much.
I fully agree with what Eric said. My addition will be a small one, but I think it's an important one still. In most organizations, I have seen how they measure change. They do really have some good metrics to measure the impact of change. However, often when they miss something, it is the emotional dimension of it. So I would also recommend somehow measuring it. It's harder to measure, but really identifying how people are feeling about it overall. And not just by sending a survey question out, do you think this has been a good change or whatever, but really being on the ground, because in most cases, I have seen in lots of examples of organizations thinking they have done the change very effectively. And you go talk to the people, everybody's like, well, I don't even know what this happened, like why this happened. So just because they looked at some metrics and they somehow people may have tricked the system to show the numbers right so that it looked everything successful, but you know, the failure is in the other part of the less visible, less quantitative part of change that I think also needs to be measured. By the way, this is another reason when we know research after research shows 70% of change efforts fail in average, right? But if you go to organizations, I haven't seen any organization accepting 70% of their change programs fail. So when you look at them, it looks like 80 to 90% of them did a great job, and then maybe 10 to 20 failed, according to those organizations, right? And this is the reason, in my opinion.
Wow, you couldn't be more right with that one. And I'll just add one of the things that I see quite often is, you know, when we think about a change, there's 3 phases: plan, manage, and sustain. And I can share in the organization that I work for, we need to be better about sustaining. So we think we've checked the box, we're moving on, right? Where, you know, a lot of our folks haven't adopted the new way of working, or there's been some sort of disruption or barrier that we haven't counted on. And yet we're moving forward. And what that kind of leads to, in my experience, is, you know, doing the change over and over again, because we haven't figured out what's going to really make that stick. But also thinking about our workforce and kind of the turnover aspect, right? And we've got these new folks that are always entering and building that into that sustainability plan. So certainly lots of opportunity around that sustain and measurement piece as we think about our change initiatives. I want to go to one last question here before we close out, and it's really about words of wisdom for the folks that are watching this, or listening rather, to this podcast, and what advice that you have for them around navigating change. So Eric, let's start with you.
Word of wisdom. I don't know if there will be word of wisdom, but my first comment, and again to anybody, because we're especially now, I mean, in an incredibly difficult and complex environment, be it geopolitical, be it from a technology, frankly, and there's a lot of people who are scared. I mean, they look at the past. I mean, we talked about change fatigue, and they look forward, and there's so many open questions that I think a lot of people feel more and more, I mean, uncomfortable and questioning themselves, can I really take more? And my first comment is, look, feeling uncomfortable is absolutely okay. So my first thing, everybody is, even those who say they're not because they want to be good manager and good messenger, they are. And actually, I think those, I mean, we need to be more human in also sharing that. And being uncomfortable, we haven't talked about neuroscience and change, but there's a lot of very interesting thing. Look, being uncomfortable with change is just, it's human nature. Okay, so if you're uncomfortable, it means you're human. You're not a robot. So that's that's good. And the second point, just linked to again everything that is happening. I think we need to be mindful that we have. I mean, I think all of us. We have grown in an environment, frankly, that was going into a very similar, so with a lot of change, but going into a very similar direction, with a world more and more open, essentially, and in that type of environment, with the internet opening up everything, and actually, we have done a shift, and it's not only the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. It's actually, it came much before. We see a world that is closing more and more and more right now, and there's a lot of restrictions that are being put in place. And because the new war out there is the war on data, and there's a lot happening around this. So I mean, I think of the new generation coming on, and the new generation is facing, I mean, some incredible challenge with AI that is going to change everything within the next, frankly, very, very few years. So my advice to them is, look, feel okay to be uncomfortable, just stay open, because in every change there are opportunities. And be curious, because any change is going to take you through an experience, and you're going to learn from it, and you're going to be more marketable, whether, I mean, going through that experience. So stay curious. It's frightening and it's exciting. So I'll look at the exciting part.
Thank you, Eric. Burak?
Great words of wisdom, Eric. I love that. And something I usually share with the people I coach and work with as well is that personal growth doesn't come from the comfort zone. So you do need to go out of the comfort zone and be uncomfortable, as you said. And I think my recommendation would be along those lines as well. Especially the people who are newer in their careers, before they start resisting the change or giving up, because maybe they're tired, etc., I think they should first try to be part of the change and do whatever it takes to challenge it, shape it, reshape it, speak up, whatever needs to be done, because there is the real growth.
That's great advice. Thank you both so much. It's such an opportunity for the young folks listening to become change agents, right? And the leaders.
Julie, what are your words of wisdom?
What are my words? You know what? I often say sometimes we have to change manage ourselves. And I would challenge all of the listeners to look at the positive possibilities. If it's a change that is kind of happening to you, what are the positive possibilities? Is it change they're leading, the team or group that's effective? What are the positive outcomes of this? Because sometimes I think we just get stuck in that, the fear of the unknown and some of that worry, and we go around that emotional journey. But if we can move into that discovery, that experimentation, that inquisitiveness, that'll put us so much farther ahead and kind of moving forward. And it might be that the change that you're either leading or receiving might need that reshaping, right? And you can be a part of that, like you said, Burak. So I think there's definitely a powerful message there of just getting involved and thinking about those positive outcomes that you can have. But with that, I want to thank Eric and Burak for their expertise and sharing that with all the listeners today. I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you found this insightful and informative. And again, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy.